Welcome back to World War II TV, folks. And this blustery day, as it is in certainly in France and probably in the UK as well. Joining me today for this final part of this Philippines week, but I promise you we'll be returning to the Philippines in the future, as I've found even more historians. But joining me today is Colonel Francis K.E. Neri. He is here to talk about the history of the Philippine Army Air Corps. If you are a new-time viewer to the channel, the description contains all the information you need. Welcome aboard. Please consider subscribing and maybe becoming a patron or a YouTube channel member. I'll bring in Francis now. Good evening, Colonel. How are you today?
Good evening. Fine. Hello to all.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, because I love it when we have serving personnel on, because you bring a perspective of understanding how the military works. So tell us about your day job.
Yes, I'm an active officer of our Air Force in the Philippines. My rank is a colonel. I'm a deputy commander of one of our air defense units. But since I was a captain, I've been teaching. One of my subjects is history, air power history. I've been teaching young officers, reservists in our country since then up to now. And I'm always invited to do these lectures, and I guess I'm good at it because until now I'm getting invitations to do these lectures
Well,
in
brilliant.
history.
And just, one of the things I've discovered with military groups visiting Normandy is some units, serving units around the world, have huge understanding of their past, and others have very little. I'm thinking of particularly British commandos understand their history, US Rangers understand theirs. Over there in the Philippines, do people understand, the young officers and people you meet, do they understand the history of the Philippines? Obviously, after your talks, they do, but do they come into it understanding it?
Uh, maybe the better word is appreciation. They're getting a
Right.
better appreciation. Understanding a certain level, but definitely they're appreciating it. We're just giving time for these new generation of officers to better gain its importance, and hopefully it will guide them in their respective careers, not only with the military but even those in the civilian sector.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, you've come on with a PowerPoint, folks. We'll do questions as we go along, but I'm fairly certain the Colonel will be providing a lot of information you need. But please feel free to ask questions. And I'll hand over to my guest to learn about this aspect of history that personally, I don't know very much about it, and I'm looking forward to finding out. So over to you.
Yes, greetings to all from the Philippines, representing the Philippine Army Air Corps history. But before I continue, I'll just give you a brief description how our air arm evolved through the years, beginning with the colonial era of the Americans. Okay, we are for those who are not familiar with our country, we are a colonial. We are a colony of the Americans after our war with them, Philippine American War. In the 20th century, the Americans have control over us. So we'll be discussing how our air arm developed, starting with the Philippine National Guard up to the Philippine Air Service. Now, so to begin with, first manned flight happened in our country on 21 February 1911. As you can see in this picture, this is an American, James C. Bud Mars, who brought along his Skylark biplane. It's in Manila, our capital city in the Philippines. So from here, it's part of the American effort to expose the Filipinos to the latest technological trends happening around the world, and that includes aviation. So Mr. Mars brought in his Skylark biplane and flew along Manila Bay near Manila. And from there, its importance to the Filipinos, the young ones, actually, many young guys, the Filipinos who saw Mars flight, became uh, 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 became motivated. Okay, they gained the motivation to also become pilots themselves. So that is the impact what Mr. Mars gave to our and to our early Filipinos then, and many of them who were young men during that time would later become pilots. So this is the first in the Philippines, the first aircraft to fly, an aircraft by an American, James C. Bud Mars. Okay. Now, World War One erupted in 1914-18, and the Americans joined in 1917. And being a colony of the Americans, the Philippine legislation demonstrated support to the Americans in fighting the Central Powers. So they created a law for them to create a military arm. So that is the Militia Act 2715. So from there, it allowed us the creation of the Philippine National Guard, which was approved on March 1917. And the law, in addition to ground forces, it also stipulated the creation of the aviation unit composed of 15 officers and 135 enlisted personnel. So basically, this is the basis, a law that showed that we will be having our own air arm for the first time. And so we 50 pilots, I mean, not pilots, 50 men were selected to undergo pilot training. Okay, so first they underwent ground training. And so this is Major Joseph Steve Nutt. He is the one who will be commanding the training of these Filipinos. Their training area is a Corridor Island, and they're supposed to fly the Martin Type S tractor hydroplane. So with the while their ground training is on progress, unfortunately, back in America, the continental United States, the Americans needed all the aircraft they could get to train their own pilots in the mainland. So I think there are around four of these hydroplanes here in the Philippines then, and these were recalled back to the U.S. But still, the Filipinos continued their ground training. Now, when their training was completed, uh, the local American military sent a message to the United States that there are 35 Filipinos who passed the ground training and ready for flying training in the U.S. Okay, since there are no planes here in the Philippines, they're expecting that the 35 Filipinos will be going to the U.S. to undergo flying training. But unfortunately, the Americans gave a negative reply on 15 March 1918, informing the local Americans here, colonial military here in the Philippines, that there's no need for these Filipinos to go to the United States because they already have enough
Mm.
pilots, trainees in the U.S. So as a result, since there'll be no more air arm, the aviation section for the Philippine National Guard was disbanded on 18 March 1918. Okay, so going forward, World War One ended in 1918, and from 1920 to 1921, there's a surplus American aircraft that the Americans put up for sale around the world, and among the countries who bought these aircraft are the Philippines. So this is Steve Nutt, as presented earlier. He is an active U.S. Army, but later he left the service and became a businessman. He knew there's a potential for business in the country for a flying school, aviation. So there, as a businessman, as Mr. Steve Nutt applied for a franchise to the Curtis Aeroplane Company so that he could open a flying school in the Philippines. And that he was successful. He was able to get the franchise. And when he went to the Philippines, he talked with the Governor General. Governor General Harrison was the one leading the Philippines then, and he approached his government with the offer that he can train Filipino military men to become pilots. And so with that, the Philippine Militia Commission created plans for the creation of the Philippine Air Service. Okay, so it's an air arm to support the military units in the country then. So with that development, they were able to create a school at Camp Claudio in Parañaque. So basically, it's in beside Water Manila Bay. Initially, they got four JN4 jetties, as shown here, and one HS-1L Seagull for the planes he will use to train the Filipino military pilots. Okay, so initially there were 33, okay, from the government, chosen by the government to undergo pilot training. But Mr. Sivnat is not focused only to the government. He also opened his school to civilian sector as well. 10 civilians also applied for training to fly. So these guys were able to pay for their training, in addition to the government to also spend for the training of their military personnel or military officers for the school. So out of the 33 military pilots or military trainees, 25 were able to successfully complete the training. So on 29 December 1920, this is the first class picture, okay, of Filipino military pilots who completed their flying training. And
And this
so,
is really early, isn't it, Francis? I mean, we're talking about when the world is only beginning to understand the importance of air power. I mean, while you were talking, I pulled it up on Wikipedia. I mean, Royal Australian Air Force doesn't start till 1921, New
mhm,
Zealand 23, Egyptian
yes,
Air Force 1937, Romanian Air Force 1924, even the Italian Royal Air Force wasn't till 1923. So the Philippines are in the game really early. Okay, maybe they haven't got the most advanced aircraft, but they're already. What's impressing me is that your country is already thinking about air power as a service. It's moving towards what we'd eventually call, combined arms, navy and land, and that this is really early. This is my takeaway already, is how early you're doing this.
yes. Actually, thanks to the two of some Americans who really supported the effort, like Mr. Steve Nutt and Governor General Harrison. Now, these two really worked hard, and they really supported the Filipinos during that time. They really want to have our country go forward in technology, so appreciating aviation. So these are the two Americans who really helped. But there's another side of the coin, which I will discuss to you in the next presentation.
Okay.
Un- Unfortunately, Governor Harrison, who is supportive of the Philippines, was replaced by Governor General Leonard Wood. Okay, so Governor General Leonard Wood has a different idea in governing the Philippines. He implemented cutbacks on the budget, and a lot of projects that deals with the Filipinos' advancement. Basically, he canceled them, like the abolition of the Philippine Air Service. Okay, he ordered the abolition of the Philippine Air Service, and this is bad for the Filipinos then, who really worked hard to
Mm.
create this flying school. And so, 19 December 1921, he ordered the American military to have the Philippine Air Service aircraft, equipment, and facilities at their flying school, Camp Claudio, to be turned over to the American use. And so, as a result, in scuttling the Philippine Air Service, Governor Leonard Wood delayed the creation of an air arm in our country for 13 years. So these are, again, a negative development. But as I mentioned earlier, there are Americans really helping us.
Yeah.
But this guy really affected everything. But still, these pilots who graduated from the first class became the pioneers of Philippine aviation. The those who were really uh, dedicated to service remained in the military, where again they did not continue their flying. But those who left the service, especially those on civilian who also went to the school, they became the pioneers of Philippine aviation in the civilian sector. Many of them flew mail planes. They flew circus performances, and also crop dusting. They also did the transportation of personnel and all that. So though the military did not move ahead in aviation, definitely the civilian had a major step happening with that school of Mr.
Mm.
Steve Nutt that he did for the Filipinos. Okay, now we now go to the Philippine Army Air Corps, 1934-47. Though despite attempts, there were two attempts previously to revive the Philippine Air Arm. But finally, 1934, the third attempt was successful. thanks to these three guys, Captain Russell Morgan, Major Porfirio Sablan, and General Basilio Valdez. Major Porfirio Sablan is one of the pilots from the original class.
Right.
He's now a major. And General Basilio Valdez is the commander of the Philippine Constabulary. Now, these three work hard to bring back the Philippine Air Arm into the military, which is then called the Philippine Constabulary. So, 05 September 1934, the Aviation Committee presented a new proposal for the activation of a Philippine Constabulary Aviation Unit to the 10th Philippine Legislature, which allowed us the creation through Legislative Act 4194. Legislative Act 4194 allowed the creation of the Philippine Constabulary Air Corps on 08 December 1934, and which took effect on 01 January 1935. Now, this time, a new American Governor General, Frank Murphy, supported the effort. Okay, so slowly but surely, the Philippine Air Arm is now gaining from this development. And we have our first air base. This is located in Quezon City. Location is the general headquarters of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Okay, initially, but it's called Camp Murphy. Now, this is our first installation, Sablan Field, named after Major Porfirio Sablan, as I mentioned in the first slide. He's the one who worked for the creation or the air arm. Now, he underwent a refresher course in flying in the United States, but unfortunately, he was killed during the training. Okay, so he passed away on 17 June 1935. Okay, but later, the development, the Americans finally decided that the Philippines will be independent. So the Commonwealth is a preparation for the Philippines to become independent for 10 years. So with that development, the Philippine Constabulary Air Corps was redesignated the Philippine Army Air Corps on 11 January 1936. Now, during that time, it is expected that by 1946, the Philippines will be independent from the Americans.
Mhm.
So the Americans gave us a 10-year preparation before we gained our independence. So the Philippine Army Air Corps is now in being, and the first aircraft we acquired is the Stearman, a model 73L-3 primary trainer plane. This is the first aircraft that we have with our beloved, okay, Diamond. This is the Philippine Air Force's roundel insignia, but later, currently, we have wings on this one, but it started as a Diamond.
Right.
Just a brief history. They got this design from the first unit that operated aircraft from the Signal Company of the American Army, which is a Diamond. And the Filipinos who designed the roundel decided to use this as a basis. So the first Stearman flew on 02 May 1936. This is the most prolific, the most numerous aircraft of the Philippine Army Air Corps. It was not only used in training, but also for ground attack and reconnaissance and transportation of personnel. So a few days after the first Stearman flew, the Philippine Army Air Corps started operating a small flying school in Sablan Field to meet the need for trained pilots. Now, around 100 came in and were selected to undergo flying, but not all of them were taken in, so they were divided into batches. The smallest batch is 4, and six. The biggest one is a 12, 14 students per class. So by 1941, the Philippine Army Air Corps had 74 planes, 142 pilots, and 1,700 enlisted personnel deployed in 4 installations. So it grew. The Philippines is slowly but surely getting has a growing air arm to support this military. And we have 4 bases by that time, by the beginning of the Pacific War, actually. Sablan Field, Camp Murphy, Batangas Field in Batangas, and Manique Field, Camp Tiño, Cabanatuan. These 3 are all located in the island of Luzon, and Lahog Field is located in Visayas, in Cebu. So these are the 4 bases operated by the Philippine Army Air Corps before the Pacific War of 1941.
Okay, a question for you from Kevin Jones, Francis. Were any of the planes manufactured in the Philippines under license, or are they all imported?
They're all imported. There's one plane, but that did not enter Philippine Air Corps service. So basically, all of these came from the Americans. As you
Okay.
can, okay. And among the most modern that we got from the Americans is the Boeing P-26P shooters, which equip the 6th Tactical Pursuit Squadron. Now, initially, these planes were used by the U.S. Army Air Corps in the Philippines. After use, they were transferred to the Philippine Army Air Corps. They received the Severskys P-35 and P-40s. So they started cascading this back to the Filipinos when they started receiving more modern equipment. Another quite old platforms, the Martin B-10B medium bombers, which equip our only bomber squadron or the 10th Bombardment Squadron of the Philippine Army Air Corps. We have only three of these, and not I think only one was available, was operational when the Japanese attacked our country.
Okay. Like another question for you. This one's for me. So we're talking about obviously the massive influence from the USA, where the aircraft models are American, the some of the inspirational figures have been American. But when I did the show about the defenses on Corregidor and around Manila with Tony Ferredo, he was talking about the influence that the Philippines had taken from the British, in perhaps in Singapore and elsewhere. And the Philippines is, of course, part of Asia. So had this early Air Force been looking elsewhere in Asia for influence about doctrine or tactics or methodology, or was it really all coming from the USA?
Uh, Basically, it's all coming from the United States. The Philippine Army Air Corps is patterned along the lines and organization of the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Right.
All of them basically the U.S. And
Okay.
since we during that time we're still under control of the Americans, we're not yet independent, so we got all the pointers from the American military.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, with that, the Philippine Army Air Corps getting all the capabilities needed to have a proper air arm. It can maintain its own aircraft. Training is good with signal, and they're also doing other requirements to maintain, sustain Philippine Army Air Corps air power, as shown in these pictures. Until the Pacific War started in December 1941 when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Almost the same time, they also conducted their air attacks in the Philippines. I think 6 hours after Pearl Harbor was attacked, and two-thirds of the American aircraft were basically destroyed in the ground and a few in the air. Almost the same case in the Philippines. Philippine Army Air Corps, many of its aircraft were also destroyed on the ground. But many of the Boeing Stearmans survived, and they continued working with the American military and the Philippine military in doing recon and sending a relaying message using these biplanes. Just to give an initial understanding between the two combatants, the Filipinos used the P-26P shooter, and the Japanese generally the early version of Zero, the A6M2. You can understand. You can see here the Filipinos had a very hard time fighting the Japanese. Not only were their mounts outdated and not as heavier armed than as the Zero, they're also outnumbered. Okay, they fought usually around the ratio of one 7 to 4 to 1 for every pea shooter of the Filipinos. So maybe you're asking, but during the engagements, only two pea shooters were shot down. A few were damaged, but only one pilot was killed in action. Maybe the you'll be asking how come that happened. the Japanese have overwhelming numbers, and they also have better fighters. How come the Filipinos survived that way? So during the initial engagement, I usually explain to my students that the Japanese have this disadvantage of the distance, since during the
Hmm.
opening attacks they operated from Formosa. Now we all know Taiwan. The Japanese pilots are definitely very much conscious of their fuel. They
Yeah.
would rather to go back to their base. So maybe they're not that aggressive in fighting during the initial open engagements of the P-26. So only two were shot down and two were damaged. Luckily, only one of the Filipino pilots were killed in action.
But do we know what the Japanese orders were? Because, as a Brit, I'm thinking of the Luftwaffe attacking in the Battle of Britain. But, they trained attack. Are they there to knock out the Philippine Air Force? Are they there to support bombers? Are they there for ground operations? What do we think was the Japanese priority in that early period?
They're trying to gain air superiority, dominate, or destroy the American air power. The Filipinos are, I think, shall I say, a bonus targets for them, and they're more looking for American targets. But anyway, all bases were targeted.
Yeah.
There are few. Luckily, it's from the fighters of the Filipinos. The two bases were not hit. The Japanese failed to locate their bases, and that's the reason they were able to take off and engage Japanese in strength. Fourth, during the few of their engagements, they were able to fight with six P-26 up to four as a squadron. Okay, this is Captain Jesus Villamor. He's the one who led the 6th Pursuit Squadron. Very much a highly skilled pilot. Uh, he is considered the number one hero of the Philippine Air Force. So he led the 6th Pursuit Squadron in fighting the Japanese, and they're quite successful. Many only one were killed, and they're very much, shall I say, optimistic because they have these incredible claims of shutdowns of Japanese aircraft. So almost all of the pilots gave claims that they were able to shoot down aircraft, but for the Philippines, actually the Philippine Air Force, we only took two with actual shutdowns because I think it is required that there should be a witness of their kills. So in this case, we have only two, and though Captain Villamor claimed to have shot down one bomber and two Zeros, he only have one confirmed kill, the Mitsubishi G3M medium bomber. Uh, his witnesses are the Americans at Clark Air Base, based on the records. And the other one is Lieutenant Care. Okay, he's the only one to have so far the only Filipino fighter pilot up to this date to have shot down another fighter. He was able to shoot down one Zero fighter, even though he fought three, but he was badly wounded in this engagement. He was performing a solitary mission, recon, south of Luzon, but he got entangled with three Zero, but he survived. But he was able to shoot down one of them. He has witnesses, the coast watchers at the Bicol area, southern Philippines, were able to see his engagement. So that's the reason his skill was confirmed.
Hmm.
Uh, and remember what I told you, the only Filipino fighter pilot to be killed in the air combat is Lieutenant Cesar Basa. Our primary fighter base, the Philippines, was named after him, Basa Air Base. So far, the only Filipino fighter pilot killed in air combat. Okay, despite all these engagements, things are not looking good for the Philippine Army Air Corps. Higher headquarters and General MacArthur ordered the Philippine Army Air Corps to destroy all the remaining aircraft and join the retreat to Bataan. Now, this was badly. This is very much disputed by the pilots and the Philippine Army Air Corps because they believe they could have brought the aircraft to Bataan, but for some reason the order stayed for them to destroy all the remaining aircraft and march to Bataan. At Bataan, the Philippine Army Air Corps received uh, a crash course in infantry fighting tactics, because as we all know, uh, these are Army Air Corps guys who basically focus on aviation, but they have no training in infantry tactics, so they were given hasty training, and their comrades called them the flying infantry. Okay, so their job is to secure the only airfield in Bataan, Kabkaben, and they should be securing the southwest part of the peninsula of Bataan. So that's the job of the Philippine Army Air Corps personnel who marched to Bataan. Now, significantly, when the Japanese initiated Battle of the Points, an attempt to outflank the Filipino-American forces in Bataan by landing two battalions at the rear, basically southwest of the peninsula, as you can see in this map. Japanese attempted to outflank the Americans and the Filipinos, and when they conducted landings here, among the defenders of this part of the peninsula were the Philippine Army Air Corps. Though there are other American and Filipino Army units there, the Philippine Army Air Corps also participated in this battle, the Battle of the Points.
And another question for you, Francis, from Keith Rowe. How many civilian aircraft were absorbed by the Philippine Army Air Corps, and did they have or create Army cooperation squadrons and transport squadrons? So it's kind of a question about combined arms, really.
Yes, actually, Philippine Airlines, we have a Philippine Airline, the early airline company that we have in the Philippines, Philippine Airlines. They operated the beach uh, beach transports, and these aircraft soon joined the effort for supporting the Filipino American forces. They
Right.
flew missions from Luzon to Visayas and Mindanao, carrying supplies, carrying messages. So basically the records I got is they were able to have the airline companies then to also do missions for the military for the effort during the Japanese invasion. The most significant, I guess, is the those flown by Philippine Airlines. I think the other civilian aircraft were also destroyed, but Philippine Airlines were able to do significant missions for the American and Filipino forces during the campaign of the 1941-42 of the Japanese.
Brilliant. That was a fantastic answer. Thank you. Back to you.
So it was a successful battle for the Filipino Americans at Battle of the Points, because they were able to destroy two Japanese battalions with hundreds of the invading troops killed. Now, in the case of the Philippine Army Air Corps, only for them, they lost two officers and 40 enlisted personnel killed in action during the Battle of the Points. So just to give you an idea how intense and fierce the Battle of the Points was during that campaign in Bataan. Now, we'll just be focusing on the remaining missions performed by the Philippine Army Air Corps. So one of the significant missions performed was, again, Captain Jesus Villamor. When he took a steerman and performed a photo reconnaissance of Japanese artillery positions on 09 February 1942. By this time, the Americans at Corregidor, we have coastal batteries at the Corregidor then. The Japanese were bombarding Corregidor at will from positions south of the island along Cavite area. They were bombarding at will Corregidor, but the Americans has no way of firing back because they have no way of detecting or accurately determining the location of the Japanese batteries. And so the Americans asked Captain Jesus Villamor to perform the mission and to locate the Japanese batteries in the Cavite area. Though he looked like a suicide mission, actually he has an escort of a few P-40 fighters during the mission, and there were attempts to shoot him down. The Japanese army sent in their Ki-27 Nakajima Ki-27 Nates that an attempt to shoot him down, but the Americans were able to protect him well, and Villamor was able to take pictures of the Japanese batteries bombarding Corregidor and was able to return back to base. Though his aircraft he crash landed, but he was able to get the pictures and give it to the intel The following day, the artillery in the Corregidor were able to return fire and hit Japanese artillery positions. There are pictures, social media, that MacArthur awarding him the Silver Star. I think that's the mission that he was able to do, and he was awarded by MacArthur himself on those pictures. And one story, I guess people then were really love to drink liquor. They tried to celebrate his success of his mission when another senior officer got alcohol with prunes in them, raisins prunes, and they say it's a good concoction, and they enjoyed the night drinking alcohol with the prunes and the raisins. Anyway, it's a story that one way they celebrated the success of this mission on 09 February 1942. Another incident happened after the fall of Bataan on 9 April 1942. There's an American airfield in northern Mindanao at the Del Monte airfield at the northern Mindanao. Now, this is located south of the Philippines, and this is the staging point for the Americans to escape because the Philippine American forces are already beaten in Bataan, and the Corregidor is about to fall. And this is a staging area for all American aircraft bring in the personnel before evacuating them to Australia, south. So from there at the Del Monte, there was one P-35 Seversky operational, but there's no pilot and no unit controlling it. And one Filipino pilot, again, Philippine Army Air Corps, named Captain Ramon Sosa, who never flew the P-35, okay, oriented himself for the fighter, and he flew it. And he soon became proficient in flying the P-35, which is, I think, is significant. And
Mm.
together with other P4, a few P-40s with them, he flew missions to support what's left of the forces in Mindanao. He flew a few missions together with the P-40s by attacking Japanese ships, conducting ground attacks of the Japanese when they conducted their land invasion to Mindanao. But by the time came that the Japanese were approaching their air base in Del Monte, he decided to take off and hide the aircraft in in one airfield, and he has no more. The aircraft has no. We no longer have any records about the aircraft when he hid this. But according to his story, he hid the aircraft at a barn or some sort of a barn. But since then, we have no idea what happened to the Siversky that he used.
Wow.
Okay. Okay, so after the fall of Bataan and the Japanese occupied the Philippines, those Philippine Army aircraft personnel who were not taken prisoner performed missions for the Allied Intelligence Bureau, where they sent in intel to the Americas, Australia, and the others. They also conducted guerrilla operations together with their army counterparts. This happened 1942 to 44, and the Philippine Army Air Corps were highly valued by the by the guerrillas because many of them were trained to use the radio. I guess, and officers like Villamor. There are some officers like Villamor. He went back to the Philippines. He was able to escape actually. He Many of the pilots in the Philippine Army Air Corps were evacuated to the United States. Okay, but a few of them, like Captain Villamor, he went back to the Philippines to perform intel work and support the guerrillas in their operations against the Japanese. Well, for those Filipino pilots who escaped the defeat in in Bataan and Corregidor, they went to the U.S. and they started to continue their flying training in the hope when they come back and contribute to the liberation of the Philippines. So many of the pilots went to the U.S. and undergo flying training. Uh, okay, 1944. Liberation. So when the Americans returned and liberated the Philippines, the surviving pilots and troops of the Philippine Army Air Corps started returning to military control and rejoined the American military. And the remaining pilots who were still there in the Philippines were sent to the U.S. to undergo refresher courses in flying. Okay, so it's a period of revitalization for the Philippines after World War II September. These are the first two units created when the Philippine Army Air Corps still in being. The first Troop Carrier Squadron was created in 1945, equipped with 22 C-47 transports, while the first Air Squadron was equipped with Sentinel L5 Sentinel license aircraft, and they performed license work for the ground forces during that time. And basically, 1947 is the last year of the being of the Philippine Army Air Corps. So by on 01 July 1947, the Philippine Air Arm became independent from the Philippine Army, and it became a separate branch of service of our military. It became the Philippine Air Force. So that ends my presentation on the Philippine Army Air Corps.
Well, it's been brilliant, Francis. I mean, I've loved every second of it. I have a couple of questions, and I think there'll be some from viewers as well. So my first one is kind of about, in a sense, social history. Because when I was talking with Marie Vallejo a few days ago about the first and second Filipino regiments, she was talking about how it helps the rest of the world to see the Philippines in a different light. So those pilots, for example, that went to the US for training, that must have been a good thing to show people in the US that the Filipino people could produce pilots and that were competent and skilled. Did it help with Philippines' reputation across the world? Do you think?
Yes, I believe so, because they performed well, and they went to the United States. They were able to get the socialize and
Yeah.
engage with the Americans there, and they knew better. They knew about the Filipinos fighting the Japanese then, and I think we they got a good reputation, good recognition for
Mm-hmm.
their deeds, because all of them believe that they will be going back to the Philippines to again to liberate their country.
Okay, thank you. And my next question, which is about the Japanese. We talk often about that how we talked before going live, in fact, about the reputation amongst the young servicemen you train and you educate and you help, talking about that. But back to the sort of 41, 42, did the Japanese remark about the Filipino defense, or does it not really get a mention? Obviously, they're talking about the American aircraft they're shooting down. We know about the stubborn fighting on the ground, but did the Japanese single out these brave pilots going up there in these frankly antiquated aircraft? Did they earn respect for them? Did they remark about it?
Actually, I got this historical information when Saburo Sakai, he visited our base in Nabasa Air Base, our fighter base. Okay, according to him, okay, they engage a fighter that has a fixed landing gear, and during that time, only the Philippine Army Air Corps has the fixed landing gear fighter during that time. So he he reported to those officers he talked to in the Fifth Fighter Wing, that he it's not that clear, but he mentioned of these fight the P-26. He met a P-26 in engagement. So it's not clear, but still looking at the data, what he told, because that's what I got from the old officers who were able to talk to him. Other data from the Japanese side, not much of their records on how of any information about the engagement with the Philippine Army Air Corps. Not much.
Okay, thank you. Question from Tim here. Just before the war, were Filipinos trying to get more modern planes for the US, or were they hoping to stay out of the war so it wasn't a budget priority? Because we know, we talked with Tony about how much money has been spent in the previous decades on the defenses of Corregidor and places like that. So how much of a priority is budgeting for the Army Air Corps, and were they looking to get to better aircraft?
Yes, I guess yes, it was their plans for the Philippine Army Air Corps to move forward and acquiring more modern mounts. Uh, there's an intention that if war didn't come in 1941-42, the Filipinos would have replaced the P-29s with P-35 Severskys, as the
Right.
Americans would fully equip the U.S. Army Air Corps in the Philippines with P-40s, and they're starting to remove the P-35s from service. Unfortunately, the way things happening then, the Americans only give uh, the planes that they are uh, uh, leaving. They were getting out of service
Yeah,
and
I
giving
mean,
it to
to be fair,
Filipinos.
the US are struggling to get their own aircraft for their own air force at this
Yes,
time, or their army
yes.
aircraft this time. So the world is lagging behind. We got thank you for that. We've got another question from Peter here. He said, "I was late, so perhaps this has already been addressed. Are these pilots still remembered today by the general public? Does the Philippines Air Force see them as its founding fathers?"
Oh, definitely. Those who fought in World War II are very much remembered, and many of our bases actually are named after them. I guess I've been teaching this since 2005. Now, the impact of social media is so great. Okay,
Mm.
so people got to give better appreciation of all these heroes that we got, not only made from our country, but I guess most likely to all countries, and it helped a lot. And they gained a better understanding, and there I could see a lot of discussions in social media. Even when I do my classroom lectures, they really appreciate and they know about these heroes. So I guess there's uh, no problem recognizing the accomplishment of these forefathers of ours of the Philippine Air Arm.
Thank you. And this is a good question from Rick, because post World War II, nations are changing their forces. I mean, famously, the U.S. Army Air Corps goes to become an air force. So Rick's question is: was there a change in doctrine thinking that influenced the decision for the Air Force to become independent from the Army, or were you again kind of following what the Americans are doing? What was the decision behind becoming an actual Air Force, do you think?
Actually, we became a separate branch of service, the Air Force, first before the Americans.
Ah, yes,
The
yeah.
Philippine Air Force was ahead, and the American Air Force followed. I guess the influence came from war during wartime, especially the British. And the British are the first air arm to have an independent air force. So I think war has an impact, and the Philippines are very much aware of the happening of the doctrine. So they all found out necessary that the air force should be separate from the army. I think it's
Mm.
a general understanding of all military commanders that the air force should be a separate service from the army, and the Filipinos were also influenced of that development after World War II.
Okay, thank you. But I'm assuming separate, but still integrated in the sense of combined arms. I mean,
Yes,
if the 1941-42 campaign tells us anything, it's about working together, and it's the thing that the
yes,
Allies. We've talked about it so often this channel. Each year is the incremental increase in how the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army work. And I'm talking about the British, the Commonwealth, the Americans, everybody. Everybody is struggling to work their branches together. But I'm assuming the Philippines, your service today is that you see yourselves very much as a combined. It's all the services working together.
yes, definitely. We've been doing that ever since, though they're quite difficulty, but still we're still moving in that direction.
Brilliant. Well, I think we'll leave it there. It's been fascinating. I mean, it's lovely when I have a show when I don't know really anything about it at all. I mean, I think I had heard a little bit about these individual aircraft, but not in the way you've taken us through from beginning to end. So thank you very much for that. And now I'm going to think about a reason to invite you back to talk about something else, perhaps on with Tony Ferredo as well, and talk about, because he's done a lot about the air battle as well.
Yes,
So a panel discussion, because the only thing that I thought about asking you that I'll save for other time is whether anything could have been done better in 41, 42 with the air plan. Was there some, as a Brit, we talk so often about how the Singapore plan didn't work. Was there something in the Philippines that could have been implemented that wasn't? But that's a discussion for another day. Maybe we
yes.
can talk about that. But It's been brilliant talking to you. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday, Colonel, and thank you everybody for watching. I will see you on Monday when we begin our Railways Week. And again, thank you to all the new patrons who signed up over the last 24 hours. It's been very, very grateful. This is Paul Woodadge for WW2TV saying enjoy the rest of your weekend. Cheers, everybody. Bye.
Bye.